My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
What up, Night Nation? It's your boy Roger, and we're back. We took a little bit of a hiatus for Christmas, so hopefully all of you enjoyed your holiday. We're gearing up for a new year, hopefully a new and better sports year for UCF, although we still have some seasons that are ongoing, which we'll talk about today. So Ben Stout is with us today. He'll give us a full breakdown on UCF as we head into the conference, talk about what the other teams are doing, where we stack up, how our team is doing so far, and what we expect out of this conference play as we move along. Traditionally, the bottom has fallen out, but so far we've got one loss. Best start in school history in the Division 1A era. So I think. So we'll have Ben verify that for me. So we're excited to talk about that. After that, we'll go ahead and get into a little bit of football. It's all not great news on the football front because the portal is getting ready to open. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the NIL. We'll talk about things like Iowa State losing 42 players within a week once their coach leaves, when Matt Campbell left. So we'll talk about that a little bit, and we'll get to your listener love. And this week, we haven't confirmed what day yet, but we should have Mike O'Donnell joining us separately on another show with Ben Stout this week to talk all things UCF basketball. So make sure you tune in for that as well. Without further ado, though, let's go ahead and get this show started with the one, the only, the tallest man in all of UCF podcasting, Ben Stout. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
What's up? What's up? Glad to be with you, Roger, on this New Year's Eve, and wrapping up 25 together, talking a little UCF sports. I love it.
Yeah, everybody else decided to take the day off. So not calling anyone out, Josh, Trey, or Alan, but we're calling you out. But that's okay. We've got us, the two hoops aficionados, so that's right. A good thing. And we'll get right into that with a little hooping and hollering. We're starting here first because we're getting ready to get into conference play. And this basketball team seems to be well positioned, or has been the best positioned team under head coach Johnny Dawkins going into conference play. Obviously, it's the toughest conference in the land. So, we won't have to do anything better than maybe 500 to make the tournament as an at-large bid. But, I'd love, now that we've kind of seen the first half of the season out of conference, we've all had our takeaways, talked about things along the way. But Ben, as a former basketball player, as someone who's watched a team go to the tournament, where is this team right now? And tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out of UCF basketball.
Yeah, I think in the last few years, definitely as we have entered the Big 12, and not to, you asked me to correct you. I think we actually started out the season like the first year of the Donnie Jones era back in the day. We were in CUSA, and I think we started out the season like 13 or 14-0. That was that season we beat UF in the it was the 2010-2011 season. That was the season we beat UF in the now called Kia Center in Orlando. Anyways, that's I think our best start overall in the as far as the Division I era. But obviously, starting out the season 11-1 in this era of college athletics and college sports, I think that shows you that regardless of who we've played, and we'll get into who we've played so far in a second, certainly have played a few quality opponents, and then some kind of representative opponents, usually that like Dawkins likes to put on the on the schedule out of conference, but it's hard to win 10 straight in college basketball, going up against scholarship players as well. It's hard to come together quickly and show some of the flashes that this team has shown. So I think that as UCF fans, UCF basketball fans, although we've seen a version of this story before in the last few seasons, especially since joining the Big 12. And so, I might emphasize the word cautious and the cautiously optimistic, portion of that phrase. But that being said, I think there is reason to be optimistic about this group of athletes. I think one of the things that sticks out to me in these first 12 games of the season is a few things. We've won in different ways. You'll remember we started out the season, first 4 or 5 games, we were leading the nation, or at least in the top 5 in 3-point field goal percentage. That's leveled out, although it's not as bad as in the past, for sure. Like we've certainly, had good, still a good overall team 3-point field goal percentage. So we're still shooting them at a high clip when we need to. But what we've shown over the last game since then, since starting out that hot at the 3-point line, is that we don't need the 3. We don't rely on the 3 to win. We've won in different ways. We've won with kind of a gritty, gutted out win, where we were challenged in the first half against like a Quinnipiac, for instance, and just kind of took over in the second half. We've won against a team in VMI where we just totally went cold for 3. I think we shot like something crazy, like 3 for 33 in that game from the 3-point line. But we out talented that team and completely pulled away, still won by 30. And that was mainly from offensive rebounding and from, second chance points and pounding in the paint when we needed to, fast break transition points. So we've won with our starting lineup, where our entire starting lineup, I believe it was during the FAU game, the most recent game, where all of our starting lineup was in double figures. And then we've won with our bench, where we've had, over half of our points scored in a game was coming from guys like Pacheco and Devin Cambridge or Jeremy Femina. We've had multiple leading scorers for each of these games. I think over 7-8 players, I believe, have led this team in scoring for at least a game, which is a unique stat. Kind of shows a little bit of our quality depth. So we're getting this done in many different ways, and I think that shows Johnny Dawkins and staff that we've got some versatile pieces and versatile lineups to pull from. If one thing isn't working, we can try something else. We can make adjustments. Obviously, we still got some question marks that we'll get into, but I've seen some good things from this 11-1 start. Our only loss is to an undefeated team in Vanderbilt, number 11 in the country.
Not just an undefeated team, but a team that's destroying people, averaging over 100 points a game. Pretty good offense.
And they're a legit team. They are a legit, high quality Final Four contending team. And we scored 93 in that game. It wasn't enough because they scored 105 or whatever it was. But by the same token, we were able to put up that amount, and we really gave them all they could handle, especially in that second half where we hung with them the entire time. They just kind of pulled away at the very end. But they're a high-powered offensive team, and we showed in that game and throughout these first 12 games of the non-conference schedule that we have a really high-powered offense. We are, let me pull that up real quick. We are 7th in the conference we are 6th in the conference in points per game at 88.3. When's the last time we ever have talked about, UCF basketball averaging over 85 points, let alone over 75 points, let alone over 85 points. So 88.3 points per game UCF basketball is averaging right now, which is just kind of wild. We're not necessarily just first team to 65 points, wins the game right now. We're not in that mode anymore. It's year 2, I think, of this kind of revamped offensive scheme that's been put in place by guys like Adam Hood and some other additions that we've had to the coaching staff, that I think Dawkins has done a good job of allowing them to implement their stuff. And I think also Dawkins has done a great job, and the entire staff deserves a lot of credit for reloading these last couple of years in the portal, where kind of this era of college basketball especially, and I know we're going to get into it with football a little bit later, but this era of college basketball where you've got to kind of capture kind of lightning in a bottle from one year to the next. And I think this season, more than anything else, or more than we've seen recently out of UCF basketball, is that he's able to get guys that really bought in early. And I think one of the things that sticks out as well is that this team, this assembly of players that they put together, are a relatively unselfish group. The ball is not as sticky. We've talked about that a lot. The ball is not as sticky as it has been even last year, where you had players like Jordan Ivy Curry and Keyshawn Hall, where that would just dribble the air out of the ball, and we would get into these modes where you'd see them make a couple shots, and then you get a little bit worried and uneasy as a fan, saying like, oh man, like now I hope that they are able to keep this going, because you felt like it was going to be a lot of ball dominant, like just one-on-one basketball and one-on-one play. And so that definitely is something that I've really liked. What I've seen out of this group is the amount of unselfish play, and to have a guy in Themis Folks that is just a true pass first point guard, leading the group in that manner.
So a few points, like you talked about a lot of different things, but a few things to add to your points, right? Like one, what's interesting to me as far as roster makeup is concerned is, in Johnny Dawkins' past, right, the vast majority of the time we've always had that anchor big man in that 5 in the center, trying to run the offense through. We have, John Bull, who's gotten a lot better over the season, but really isn't that guy, whether it be offensively or defensively, that is highlighted or we run the offense through. DJ last year and BJ before him, we had to, we relied on the point guard race basically to generate the offense. We're also using the passing game to get shots off earlier. And we're also using the interior of the paint with guys that are crossing, or we're setting them up by drawing folks out and then getting it into the paint to them. That's especially true, for guys like Stillwell. We've started getting John Bull involved there, but really what's interesting to me is Burks and Cambridge are two like wild cards for me, because Burks can get hot and can score a lot of points. He did that in the last game. He can score them in droves, right? And Devin Cambridge, he kind of, the first few games out, he's a transfer from Texas Tech. The first few games out, he seemed like he was just off, but now it seems like he's found his rhythm offensively. He's found the correct spacing to find the shots that are good for him within 10 feet of the basket. He's being more dominant on the boards. And really, one of the big differences that I see in this year's team is not only are we shooting earlier in the shot clock to score points, but also these guys are just on the offensive rebounds, rebounding specifically, but rebounding in general. This team is rebounding better than just about any other team that I can recall that's out there. And part of that is Stillwell. Now, the interesting thing and Cambridge too. The interesting thing that comes of note, and I'd love for you to expand upon, is how do we feel like when we get into conference play, when we start seeing these bigger lineups that are going to be more physical, will Stillwell still be able to be as dominant? He is on the smaller side, quote unquote, right? He's stocky, right? So he can block people out and get in position, but he's on the smaller side as far as that's concerned. And then secondarily, with Folks that you mentioned, you mentioned pass first, and that was driving me nuts early on because he wasn't a scoring threat whatsoever. And so teams would just sit on him and wait for him to pass out of it. And now he's developed that part of his game and integrated himself as a scorer, which now, defensively, you have to account for him, to actually try to make it in, crash into the glass. And you have to try to stop him versus just pulling back out because knowing he was just going to more than likely pass the ball off. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the dynamic as we go into conference play. Will we be able to keep the rebounding up? Do you feel like the team, because again, we have a lot of like mid 6'5", 6'2" to like Demas Folks is 6'2". He doesn't look 6'2" on the floor, but he's 6'2", right? So we got a lot of guys that are in between that 6'4", 6'5" to 6'9", 10 range. And when we talked about this early on, it was more like, okay, is this going to be more like Houston's teams, right? Which were known for playing smash mouth basketball and being really, really good on the glass. So can this team hold up to conference play when we get into conference play against some of these teams in the Big 12?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something to really watch for. As I'll take the rebounding portion first. I mean, so right now, obviously it's not against Big 12 competition, but just to kind of like as far as our schedule and how that's played out. I mean, we're third in the conference in rebounds per game. We're number one in the conference in offensive rebounds per game. So that kind of shows how we've been able to step up in that category. And it's interesting how we're getting that done. I mean, Jermichael Stillwell is he's a bully of a player. And I just think that he has, in my opinion, just like Folks, both of those guys coming from Milwaukee and kind of, Folks was the leading scorer on that Milwaukee team. Obviously, Jermichael Stillwell averaged a triple-double. He averaged nearly 11 rebounds a game last year. But Folks was the leading scorer on that team. He averaged almost 16 points a game. So he was looked to as more of a scoring guard. And I think that shows not only, Dawkins' ability to talk with him and help him understand what his role needs to be on this team. But obviously, I give a ton of credit to Folks himself for being able to expand and understand his role with this team, which is to find the right players in the right position, but then recognize when you have the opportunity to score. And he's shown, as you just talked about, the ability to do that. But to get back to rebounding, I mean, I have been worried about certainly our depth in the front court. We've talked about it all season so far, and going back to before the season started. Are we going to have the right amount of size to deal with the type of guys like Badinga at Kansas and these big body guys that are just are just known for bullying people the way we've seen so far Stillwell has the ability to do. I think one of the things that's impressed me about Stillwell is just how well he gets position on the floor for the rebounds, how high of an energy guy he is, just how good his motor is. I think that's impressed me. I kind of had an expectation that he would have a high motor, just some of the stats that he was able to put up at a mid-major school. But by the same token, I think I've been impressed regardless of the opponent that we've had. He's never disappeared in the games. I feel like he's really settled into what this team needs of him. And Stillwell is just one of the things that's actually impressed me a lot about Stillwell is the amount of steals that he gets. He leads our team in steals, but like he's in the pick and roll in the high court, like he is able to guard the pick and roll so well because he can press up on the guard, and he's got a lot of steals kind of at the top of the key area where the guard gets a little bit surprised at how well he can either switch onto them temporarily or hedge and recover so well. He's gotten a lot of steals on that type of pass, either the roll pass or the guard getting a little bit messed up because he hedged or switched onto them so well that they're trying to pass to somebody else, and he's able to get in that passing lane. I think that's something that translates to Big 12 play, his kind of quickness. And then you mentioned Houston in the context of rebounding, and obviously that's, in my opinion, the standard when it comes to defense and rebounding. Defense and rebounding in this conference and in the country, quite frankly. And you got a guy like Stillwell that, I don't think it's totally a biased statement on my part to say that he kind of fits in that mold. Like he's kind of that Houston, type player with all the tenacity that he has and the way he attacks the glass. He's the type of guy that I see, I don't see that necessarily stopping as the competition ramps up. I kind of only see him raising his level of play as the competition ramps up. And now the potential issue there is, who else? And John Bull is somebody who's 7'2". He's got long arms and he is a big body down there. So far, he has, he's not like a 30-minute a game, 30-minute a night guy. He's played about half the game so far as game minutes go. I mean, he's averaging, a little over or nearly 16 minutes a game right now. So it's not like he's our like steadfast, like he's definitely our big that's in there all the time. But when he is in there, I think he's getting better and better at changing shots and using his body. Obviously, we saw a double-double against FAU, which was really necessary. It was great to see him get some confidence going into conference play. I think he's going to struggle as the competition, or I should say not necessarily struggle in the sense that I think he's in for a little bit of a rude awakening. Now he's been in big conferences before, hasn't played significant minutes as with his previous teams, but I think this level of play is going to be a little bit different with his role on our team. And so I am worried about the depth, and Famina is our other big guy, our other center. And I think he's probably got the best touch around the basket on the offensive end for us of any of our like true big men. And that's kind of a low standard because you got a guy in Bull that's pretty raw. But on the defensive end, I think Jeremy Famina is a bit of a liability right now.
Yeah, what I'd like to see out of Bull, he's been getting better about not getting boxed out of the glass, right? So he's been getting better position, so that's been really, really, really good. Yeah. Defensively, this team, we talked about the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they've been allowing 74.9 points per game. And what's interesting to me overall is this team pretty much ranks 6th, 7th, or 8th in every single statistical category.
Yeah, except for offensive rebounding, basically, and rebounding. Rebounding, they're number 2 or 3, yeah.
Right. And that's in a way a good thing, right? Because if we're 6th, 7th, or 8th, if we get top 8, that means we're probably going to get in the league, we're probably going to get a at-large bid.
Right.
And when I look at the defense, you've got Houston at number 1 at allowing 60 points per game, allowing opponents 60 points per game and 38.8% shooting. West Virginia is right behind them at 60.2 and 6.2. And 39.5. So then you have to get all the way down to BYU at number 8 to have above 66 points per game. Right. So we've got some really, really challenging defenses. Half the league has really, really good defense. Now, how much of that is who they played, Who knows, right?
Sure.
But then you get into the point differential, right? So this is where your offense kind of offsets that defense. And now all of a sudden UCF is back up in 8th place at 13.4 points per game. Teams like Kansas are below them. Teams like Texas Tech are below them. We're ranked number 12. Arizona State is below them. So it's interesting, this team and the dynamic. They're going to score a lot of points. Their defense isn't as good as past defenses, but they're also playing more possession. They're not playing a possession game like previous Johnny Dawkins teams, because they're trying to score off of fast breaks and off of
Transition.
Transition. Yeah, a lot of transition offense. And then the other part about it is, you're right, we've got a lot of turnovers. We're constantly clogging the lanes. I'm a little worried with Stillwell, because one of the things that we've seen consistently, when you start getting into league play and you start playing brands, you start seeing a lot more ticky-tack type fouls being called for teams that are carrying the banner, so to speak, for the Big 12. Sure. And you can say what you want, but I've seen it consistently. The good news is that we have a lot of depth in the bench, but I'm worried that Stillwell will get himself into foul trouble early. So I think that's something that we're going to have to be really, really careful of, because his brand of basketball, especially on defense, is just to blanket people. And you can get yourself in trouble in Big 12 play quickly and get yourself on the bench early, and 2 fouls or 3 fouls, in the first half.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Roger. I mean, I think he's done a pretty good job, and actually just tried to he's averaged a little bit over 2 fouls a game in non-conference, but I think he's done a pretty good job of staying out of foul trouble in the non-con. But obviously I know exactly what you're saying, when you're not only playing the big brands, but you're playing a more physical style of basketball in the Big 12 than potentially some of the opponents that we've played so far. I definitely think that's his style, and it's not going to – I don't think that the coaching staff is ever going to want to have him dial it back, but certainly they're going to want him to play and be smart as a basketball player, and make sure that he is playing with that tenacity that he's known for, and that energy that he's known for, but playing smart as well. I hope he can stay out of foul trouble, because I do see some depth on this team, but we obviously don't have a whole lot of depth at the front court position. I think a lot of our depth is really – a lot of our quality depth especially is kind of more in the 1, 2, and 3, I would say. But all that being said, I think he does have the game to translate to a higher level of play in the Big 12. I'm not as worried as I was necessarily in the beginning of the season with our lack of front court depth. And that's mainly because I've seen some really good things out of guys like Folks, and Folks just kind of running the show. And the overall unselfish play of this team. And then also a guy that we haven't even mentioned Riley Kugel yet, but we'll get to him in a second. But I really do like Jordan Burks' game as well. I mean, we've talked about him a little bit, but just his athleticism and his length at that kind of swingman position, playing in 3 or 4, depending on what lineup that we're playing. I think that gives us just so much versatility. He is right now at this moment our leading scorer, although we've got 4 players that are averaging over 12 points a game. We've got 3 players that are averaging over 13 points a game. And so I think that leading scorer is going to, potentially flip-flop regarding or depending on the matchup, I should say. But I think that's an advantage that we have is that we've got some versatility, especially in our starting lineup, where you don't know exactly where the bulk of the points are going to come from on any given night, which makes our scouting report a lot more difficult and a lot more guys to concentrate on for our opponents, which is a good thing. And right now, Jordan Burks is leading the show at 13.8 points per game with some of the games that he had down the stretch in the non-conference. But Riley Kugel's right behind him. Riley started out super hot. He's a kid that, as I've mentioned on this podcast, like I've watched him play since about his sophomore, junior year at Dr. Phillips High School, which is where I went. So I just kept an eye on him. And he's an extremely talented player. I think what a lot of UCF fans, myself included, need to see from him is just overall bringing his like energy on every single play, like bringing more energy on every single play, and kind of stepping up his level of play to kind of match up with the high level of talent that he has. And what I mean by level of play is just kind of matching what his potential is from a talent standpoint with effort on every single play. I think we're getting used to seeing the amount of effort and getting excited about the amount of effort that a guy like Stillwell and certainly Burks brings to every play, the intensity that Folks brings to every play, whether it's on the offensive or defensive end. But we haven't seen that consistently out of Riley Kugel. That being said, to give him a little bit of credit, he's gone through long stretches this season after starting out the season hot. I think first 6 or 7 games of the season, he was averaging over 16, 17 points for us. It was by far our leading scorer, and he was looking like our go-to, like number one offensive threat, and still has the possibility of doing that over every night. But there was a long stretch there the last about 5 or 6 games where he certainly struggled. There was a couple games where he didn't score at all or didn't have a field goal until a couple minutes left in the game. But during those games, what I did see out of him on the offensive end, even when he was struggling, there was a game where he didn't have a field goal until maybe 5 minutes of the game. But even on certain possessions, I didn't necessarily see him trying to get his or really press, what's the word I'm looking for? Just really trying to, just ball hog and trying his best to just kind of press the issue of trying to force things. Force thing is what I'm really trying to say. I didn't see that out of him. I actually saw a number of plays where he made the right pass and got an assist, even though he still hadn't scored in the game yet. And I think that part of his game, just speaking to the unselfishness of this team as a whole, I don't think people realize how good of a passer he is. He really does make his court vision is a pretty high level. And I think that if he can just bring that energy up to the level that he needs to for us to be a competitor in the Big 12 and for him to be a competitor in the Big 12, that kind of matches his talent. It'll not only help him on the scoring sense, but it'll also help him on the distributing sense as well. And so I think we need to see a little bit more of that consistent effort out of Riley Kugel, and that'll raise our overall team play.
He's got good handles, right? And so early on in the season, you saw him use those handles to his advantage to get to the basket. And he's just not doing that anymore. He's just kind of sitting and waiting. And so I think, especially if Folks gets into foul trouble, we need him to be that guy that can drive the offense that way. Although, in addition to him, someone else who's kind of stepped up is Chris Johnson. And I've really liked what I've seen out of him. Now, he's more of a ball hog than what Folks or any of the other guys are, but he makes things happen. He can shoot the 3 consistently. He's been very, very good at creating offense, and he's got handles as well. So I think we've got, if Folks goes out for whatever reason, God forbid he had an injury or, he just has too many fouls or whatever, we've got 2 capable point guards that I think can run the offense for us and also give us different looks if for some reason they're game plan, someone's got something game planned against Folks really well, which bodes well for us, offensively. The other thing that I'd like to see more of, we saw it early on, and I think Johnny Dawkins intentionally has been kind of holding back on it, is the press. So we've got a real good we've got enough depth for full court press. And if we need to late in games, we can press to slow down the offenses, et cetera, as well, if we've got a lead. So, you know, I want to see more of that from us. And, you know, some of this goes into game planning as well against the opponent that you're playing and who's good and who's not. You know, UCF's number 4, actually, by the slimmest of margins in field goal percentage in the conference right now. So Baylor leads at 52.1, Iowa State at 53.2, and they're averaging 90 points per game. Arizona, 52, averaging 90 points per game. Baylor's averaging 95.6, and then you've got UCF at 88.3 and 49.6%. So when you think about it, you know, it's really what defensive levers can we pull to cause, you know, 1 or 2 possessions here or there for people to, you know, not score. And if you look at what the opponents have been doing in the score differential, we've been successful at that. So we've got some good defenses. We are getting more turnovers. We've got a really good offense that can consistently score from multiple positions in multiple ways, as you've mentioned. And we've got the ability to press. And if we can pull that press out of our back pocket every once in a while, I think that's going to be a huge differentiator for us, especially with teams that outsize us, right? Mm-hmm. So if we can keep those guys and limit the amount of time that they have to set up plays, and get them to hurry up shots, especially against teams that don't have as high of a field goal percentage as what we do. I think that's going to play huge dividends for us down the stretch.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, I think that you're right. In the non-conference, it's almost like we've called it out of timeouts, or we've done it for stretches of the game where we've pressed them in the full court. But you know, once we got to a certain point in the game, or you know, you were able to take a certain amount of lead, like we, you know, weren't showing that as often, probably just for energy purposes, or maybe the lineups that he decided to put in the game at that point. So we've definitely shown good flashes of it, and I think this team has a lot of really good potential to be that, especially when you got guys that are that have length and have some quickness in guys like Fulks and in Burks and even Stillwell to a point. And then you got guys coming off the bench like Chris Parker that have got a lot of athleticism and you know, are a good defender for stretches. I think that's something, depending on the lineup that we have in the game and what matchups are going to work well for us. I think we're going to see a lot more of the full court press lever being pulled, as you said.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You know, you mentioned the rebounds earlier. I pulled our rebounding stats for us right now, and I don't think I've seen this in a UCF basketball team probably since the Keith Clanton days. We're at a +10 rebounding differential compared to our opponents, right? And that's good for number 3 in the conference. Yeah. Behind Arizona at 14 and Baylor at 10.5, and we're at 10.3. I mean, the next closest one is Iowa State at 7.5, and crazy to me, Houston's number 13 at +4.4. So it's really, really interesting. This team has the ability to do that. We're also +4.7 for assists, right? So to me, the assist to turnover ratio is one of the biggest indicators of continued success throughout a season. Right now on assists, we're at +4.7, and turnovers were -0.8, which is still low comparatively speaking. Arizona's at 1.5. Baylor's at 1.3. Iowa State is 7.6. So we're not committing a bunch of turnovers. It's actually, other than Kansas State, it's actually one of the best. It's actually the second best. We're the second best team as far as turnovers are concerned. So third best team in assists. Actually, yeah, third best team in assists and third best team or second best team in turnovers. That's going to bode well for us going into conference play, being able to win against a lot of these other teams. Because, granted, we all say, yeah, look who we played, yada, yada. All these other teams in the Big 12 played the same type of schedule early on and out of conference.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a few of them certainly participated in that, in some of the bigger, like Thanksgiving, type tournaments in the early season. Obviously, Kansas probably had one of the tougher schedules. Arizona has played a couple of top opponents. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, outside of a couple games, and we've certainly, with games like, Vanderbilt going at Texas A&M and getting that win, I think
we played Duke early.
Yeah, Duke was an exhibition, but we still got the opponent, and played against them. I mean, I think getting that experience, and then, but yeah, the overall records, are certainly significant and good for the opponents. But not every night is a juggernaut outside of conference for an Iowa State, Arizona, or any of these teams that are tops in the country. They're still playing, games against mid majors that are, tend to get out of hand in the last 10 minutes, just like our games have gotten out of hand in the last 10 minutes as well. So I don't think anybody's looking at our schedule and saying, 11-1 is like this incredibly impressive number nationally, but I don't think they're looking at other teams in the Big 12 and thinking necessarily that their strength of schedule out of conference was, tops in the country either. And so I think we're on we've kind of shown as much of what this team, could possibly be in the conference. And moving forward, I just hope that they kind of can carry this good momentum and really understanding where they're at right now as a team, and some of the things that have made them successful, and like we've talked about, like the high level of energy that they're putting towards making sure that they're winning the rebounding battle, they're taking care of the basketball, but probably most importantly, offensively, they're sharing the basketball, and that's just something that I think I've been most encouraged about, honestly, in the entire Dawkins era. I don't think a single team has necessarily shared the ball or passed the ball, made the extra pass as good as this team has. And I still think that's probably saying something considering, the first couple of years in the Dawkins era. We of course had great success with those great players and great team that we had. But just the nature of the way that we're winning these games and the way that we pass the ball on offense is just a little bit different than those, BJ Taco teams that were just very unique from a personnel perspective.
Yeah. And as we talk about, the resume, right? The all important resume in college basketball, UCF again, in the resume for the teams that have played so far, we are now seventh in the strength of resume as far as that's concerned. And some of these part of that is some of these teams are bubble quad 2, quad 3 wins, right? Or quad 4, quad 3 wins. So the teams that we have played early on have moved up, and we expect them to continue to move up with respect to the strength of record. So right now it's at 115 is the strength of record. And, I think that UCF, what that shows is if you look at all the other metrics that we've been comparing, and we're middle of the pack in those, and we're still middle of the pack of strength of record or upper middle of the of the conference. I think that overall, what this all shows is this is going to be a competitive team in conference. Now, right now, BPI projections for this team is basically an 8-win team, so 7.6 and 10.4 losses, right? So basically an 8-win team. However, the next two teams above us, actually the next 3 to 4 teams above us, are all within 1 or 2 wins. And that's the difference between being, the 7th ranked team, 6th or 7th ranked team in this conference is basically 1 or 2 games. So again, this team going 500 is, I would say, better than 50-50 odds that this team will get to that magic number of wins that we need to go to in conference to be able to get to an invitation, an at-large invitation to the conference tournament or to the NCAA tournament.
I think the magic number is 9. I agree with you. I think our magic number if we win 9 games in this conference, and I really don't think in the highest ranked, like it's actually not too close this year. Like Big 12 is the highest ranked like conference in the country. I mean, they did the Big 12. Like I think there's a record.
It definitely isn't the SEC. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the Big 12 record versus the SEC is like crazy this year. It's like really, I mean, it's hugely in favor of the Big 12. And so I think that 8 wins. We got 19 wins going into the conference tournament. I think that the committee is looking at us and considering us. I think 9 wins in the conference when we've got 9 regular season conference wins. That means that 1 or 2 in there are for sure impressive wins. It means about 3 or 4 are like going to be 100% like at least quad 2 wins, in the conference if we can get to 9 wins. And I think at 20 wins overall, this is where the 11-1 actually does become super important.
Right.
The 10-game winning streak and the 11 wins, it does become super important because you can get to more of a magical number when you see a 2 at the start of your win column. You get that 20-win season before the conference tournament, which means that if you win a game in the conference tournament, then like all of a sudden you become a complete lock. But that's not even necessary all the time. Whereas back in 2018, we didn't win a conference tournament game in the term or the conference that we were at in that time, and we're still able in the American, and we were because we beat Cincinnati to end the season, we were able to get an at-large bid.
I think this team, we can confidently say, is going to be a bubble team. When we look at the things that make a difference from the out of conference, right? We didn't lose one of those head scratchers like we've had the last few years. And the one loss that we do have is against a team that is highly ranked and is a quad 1 loss. Now, granted, we lost at home, which sucks, right? But it's still a quad 1 loss. And our point differential in the out of conference games being as high as it is compared to the rest of the Big 12 teams will also bode well if we're on that bubble. So I think, I know we're projecting forward, right? We haven't even projected records yet of what we're thinking, let alone talked about the Kansas game and how we think that'll go. But I think if you look at it overall, all the things that we've done out of conference has set us up well if we're a bubble team at the end of conference play.
Yeah, and the hope is that Texas A&M does pretty well in the SEC, and and that quad 1
good because they
win. Yeah, I mean, we that quad 1 win, which is currently a quad 1 win. There was about a week ago or 2 weeks ago that was a quad 2 win. So it can fluctuate for sure, but if that can stick as a quad one win, I mean, I think that's, you pair that with, a couple of quad one wins we can take if we win 9 in conference. I mean, that's where it becomes, the resume becomes so strong that we're comfortably an 8 or 9 seed, and all that. But obviously we got the gauntlet of the Big 12 to get through to get there. And I'd like to briefly talk about the schedule in the Big 12, just in the sense of kind of breaking it up into parts.
Well, I agree with you there. Let me add one more thing to that conversation that we had about that. The Big 12 doing so well and being so dominant against like the SEC, which we were 10-2 against the SEC this year. What that does is that's the difference between having 8 participants in the tournament or 9 or even 10, which this conference has had in the past. So because we've been so dominant against other conferences in our out of conference schedule, that helps big time, because you don't even need to get necessarily to 20 wins given how those things stack up, especially if the other teams that UCF has played, some of those quad 4 bump up to quad 3 or quad 3s bump up to quad 2 wins, right? So I know it's a lot of metrics talk.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about this in basketball, I think that's more important than any other sport as far as understanding what those metrics look like, because of how large the tournament is, the conference that we're in, and the number of teams that we get. If this was the American, it wouldn't matter. You have to get, it's a one bid league, and when we were in it, some
games, yeah,
exactly.
You got to make the conference championship game basically in the tournament, right? Like you got to be a contender for the regular season title. Thank God we're not in that position anymore. We can afford to lose a few games because more than likely the games that we're going to lose are against a top 40 net team, right. It's just the way it goes. And, obviously we're going to have to have some ranked wins this year. I mean, we're going to have to beat some opponents at home, and man, hopefully we could start off the upset on the schedule with starting on Saturday. Who knows? But by the same token, we're going to have to take some of these teams to the wire, like we did with Houston at home at this time last year. And we're going to have to get over the hump and win those games. We're going to have to win those close games against really good opponents, as opposed to fall short like we did last year. I mean, last year we won 7 conference games, and I think that both you and I would agree that this team is more set up than, like, we don't have a key. Like, I don't want to sit here and say that like we have like a supreme like gifted athlete and talented player like Keyshawn Hall, but like on this team, but the overall sum of the parts and the way that they work together this year, I just feel I feel a lot more confident in this team being able to weather the storm and try and face adversity in this conference and pull out some of the games where we fell short. We fell short at Kansas last year after getting blown out at home a couple weeks before. We fell short at home against Houston, and we kind of know what happened at the end of that game. I feel like if JaMychal Stillwell is guarding that player whose name escapes me from Houston, that was, such a bully, like in the paint at the end of that game, like maybe he doesn't get off that shot the way it was. We won, but we still won 7 games with that group last year with a lot of injuries and some disjointed offense that kind of relied on a couple players. I don't really see that this year, and I see a different style of play that I think can overcome some of the adversity that we're going to see in this matchup. So I think that does equal a couple more wins at least. And that's what gives me a lot of encouraging thoughts as we lead into the conference.
All right, so let's get into that schedule like you were talking about. So Ben, I'm going to let you lead the discussion on that, and let's see if we can arrive on what we think this team will do, what our predictions are. And again, we'll have another conversation with Mike O'Donnell and get his take. So look out for that later this week. Hopefully, if not next week, we'll get that put out there and hopefully catch him before the season starts, because he gets pretty busy after the season.
Yeah, he definitely does. He's traveling a lot with different commentating gigs that he has. But yeah, I'm breaking this up into a few different segments that I just think are going to be interesting, where we need to, I don't necessarily want to go game by game as far as like saying, I think we're going to win this one, I think we're going to lose this one. But by the same token, I mean, I think the first 3 games of the season, where we have Kansas at home, at Oklahoma State, which is off to a good start this year, at 12-1, and then Cincinnati at home, I think being able to win 2 of those 3 games, I think we're really going to understand what this team is made of, like at Oklahoma State, our first like Big 12 road game against a team that is kind of surprising a few people this season. And then I think that Cincinnati game, I hate to talk about any game being a must win, but when Mustafa Chiam comes back into our house on January 11th, I think that's one that we need to show Cincinnati that we're a better team than they are. That's certainly a game that I feel like at home we've got to be able to take. So going 2 out of 3 in that first 3 games there would be a great way to start the season. Because
you think that's feasible?
Yes. I think at Oklahoma State, we're going to really find out a lot about this team. As I said, I think it's a game that we can win, though. I think we can go into Oklahoma State and win that game. I do think that we are a better team from what I've seen from Cincinnati this year. I think we are a better overall team than them, and us being at home, I definitely think we can take that game. So 1 out of 3 is very probable. I think 2 out of 3 would be an excellent way to start this season, and I think it's possible. But because, and what makes that important, what makes that potential of being 2-1 to start our conference slate important is the 5 games that we have coming up after that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, at Kansas State, back home for number 1 in the country, Arizona, and then go on the road 3 days later at number 3 in the country, Iowa State, which has just been not only a team that we have struggled so much against in the past, but like going at Iowa State is just going to be really difficult, to put it very lightly. And then Colorado's been a pretty good team this year, and we have to go on the road, stay on the road, I should say, 4 days later on a Saturday to play at Colorado. So that 4-game stretch is kind of like what points to the reason why I wanted to talk about those first 3 games as being really important, because, man, we can't, like, what if that's our stretch of 4 losses in a row, like, what if that's where we kind of falter? And so you certainly don't want to be 1-6 or even really 2-5 after the first 7 games of the conference, because it's not like it really gets that much easier.
It is a front-loaded schedule, though. I mean, if you really look at it, right? So, we've got Kansas early, then we've got Arizona, then Iowa State, then you've got, within the next 3 games, you've got Texas Tech, then you've got Houston. Then after that, you've got Cincy, West Virginia, TCU, all winnable games. Utah definitely should be a win. BYU, at
BYU is going to be tough.
At BYU, that's going to be a tough game. Then we've got versus Baylor at home. Baylor's got a good team as well, but we're pretty evenly matched with Baylor. I'm not bought into Oklahoma State. So we have Oklahoma State, and then West Virginia is going to be tough because that's going to be a true offense versus defense game, right? Because again, West Virginia is holding opponents to 61-ish, 62-ish points per game. So I think that this is a very front-loaded schedule. And let's say, to get to that, let's say those 9 wins that you were talking about, where would you see those 9 wins coming? And should UCF fans panic if the early going is a little less, Oklahoma State, we'd have to win. Cincinnati, we'd have to win. K-State, we can win for sure.
At Colorado, you definitely can win. It's coming off of you're playing top 3 teams in the country. You know what I mean? It's just a difficult stretch. But yeah, I mean, I think that the most. So just to kind of not to get into the weeds on Kansas, but obviously there's a very high likelihood that that Darren Peterson, the number one, top 5 projected, potentially number 1 overall pick in this coming NBA draft, is not going to play in this Kansas game. We actually only play Kansas at home this year, right? Yeah.
Yep.
We only play Kansas at home this year. So there's a good chance he may not play. That doesn't mean that Kansas has plenty of really good players and they're number 17 in the country for a reason. But Darren Peterson is like a different level of basketball player. So him not playing certainly bodes well for us when Kansas comes to town this Saturday. So could we steal that first one? I think obviously the momentum would just be through the roof at that point. We're talking about our 11th straight win. Now we've won, against a top 20 opponent and a kind of story brand. It'd be, in my opinion, bigger than our win 2 years ago, just because of the significance of what it means, like going into this conference.
So do we storm the court again, like we have on our intro video for this Kansas game?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess that'll be up to the fans and the palm fronds and all that stuff. That'll be up to more than likely the student section more than anything else. But I'll gladly accept the fine if that's what happens, because it'd be a great win. Regardless. It's possible, but you're certainly looking at those 2, Oklahoma State and Cincinnati, as wins you want to get early on. You're not going to. Nobody reasonable is thinking that number 1 in the country, Arizona, is going to come here and get a loss. But I guess anything's possible. I don't see us winning at Iowa State. It's just been a very tough opponent for us, but. The other games, the non-ranked opponents, I mean, they're all gettable games. I mean, we can win at Kansas State. It's not an easy place to play, but we can win at Kansas State. We can certainly win at Colorado. I mean, there's no doubt about that. They were a tournament team about 2 years ago. They fell off last year. We definitely played well against them last year, and I don't expect that to be any different this season. And then you've got that stretch of Arizona State, Texas Tech, Houston, where you want to make sure that you can try to take that Arizona State game and see what happens versus the ranked opponents. I see I see a path to 9 wins. There's no doubt about that. Whether it's a lot of the home games against non-ranked opponents right now, I mean, I think those are all going to be lining up to predicted where we can win those games and come out ahead. And then you kind of have the more toss-up games right now as far as prediction goes, like regardless or depending on what kind of website you're looking at, where they could be a kind of a toss-up game, like at Oklahoma State, which I've talked about, at Colorado, even Texas Tech at home could be a toss-up. I mean, if you can figure out a way to contain JT Toppin and they have a really good point guard on that team as well. Like some of the things they have going on that year, you never know. But the teams that are the top of the conference, the teams that have the lottery picks, which there are plenty of those that we're going to see this year at home and on the road. I mean, these guys like Koa Pete of Arizona, Darren Peterson, who I mentioned, maybe, or Patterson, he may not play, but you got JT Toppin at Texas Tech. You've got a guy in Houston called Kingston Flemings, who's their point guard, who's an NBA lottery pick. Obviously, when we go on the road at BYU, you got the potential #1 overall pick in AJ DeBansa, the $7 million man, whatever they paid him to go to BYU. You've got just a lot of high level potential lottery pick players that are in the Big 12 that we're going to go up against this year, and we're going to have a game plan for each of them. But do I think that we have a pathway without completely going through each game and saying win, loss, win, loss? Like, do I think we have a pathway to 9-win? Absolutely. Like I think I'd really love to see our team start out strong in those first 3 games and just notch 2 wins out of those first 3 games to build some momentum going into that really tough stretch at the beginning of the season.
All right. So what, if you had to throw a dart on the wall, an educated dart, right? Where do you think this team lands as an overall record? And do you think it's a tournament team?
Yeah, I think going into our conference tournament, I know we've focused on the number so much as a number that we have to get, but I do think that we have enough, as long as we can, I'll knock on wood, as long as we can stay healthy and kind of keep growing as a team. I think I'm very comfortable and kind of like, I think it's a realistic number to think that we're going to go 500 in conference and have 20 wins going into the conference tournament. It just feels like that's the most realistic number to me. Like, for me to try to be optimistic and say 10 or 11 wins in conference, I mean, obviously we'd all love that to be the case. I don't necessarily think that we're quite at that level yet. I haven't seen that we're quite at that level, and we haven't seen the type of opponents in the gauntlet that we're about to face. So I'm pretty comfortable with kind of sticking to that 9-win number, 500 in conference, and which I think is going to be enough for an at-large bid.
Awesome. Okay, so what should UCF fans be looking for out of this team if they're going to be successful in conference play? What are the things that are going to highlight, okay, this team's going to go the distance?
Yeah, I think it's just building upon a lot of the things that we've talked about in this conversation. It's continuing to build upon that success that we've had so far this year, as far as sharing the ball, making sure that we have a lot of fluidity to our offense, and the coaching staff making sure that we have the right lineups for the matchups that give us advantages. I think that's going to be super important. We've got a decent amount of versatility as far as who we can put in certain situations. I think we do have some quality depth. We all know that as the season progresses, that a rotation is going to shrink. So how much does a guy like Carmelo Pacheco, which we haven't even mentioned his name yet? I mean, obviously he's a super knockdown shooter, but is he is he able to kind of fit into the whole style of Big 12 play when, he checks into the game and everybody just focuses him as being a knockdown shooter? And, that's great because it stretches the floor, but does he provide enough on both ends of the floor to get significant minutes where he can provide that that firepower from an offensive standpoint. That remains to be seen. That's just one player there where, is he one of those guys that kind of gets lost in the mix as we shrink our rotations a little bit? Who knows? But that being said, I think if we can kind of put the right lineups together to give us the advantages, we can continue to see guys like Folks and Stillwell progress and be the types of players that they've shown us so far, as in Folks being a really good floor general that stays poised and kind of keeps everything together and is a huge leader for us. And then Stillwell, who just provides so much energy and has the ability to play bully ball. Can he continue that in the Big 12? I think those are the things that I'm really looking forward to and hoping that I see more of going into the Big 12.
All right. Yeah. I think those are all points well taken. I think defense is going to be the biggest thing there. When you were talking about Pacheco, what I immediately thought of was situational basketball, right? Depending on what the lineup or what the strength of the other team is. And then also if we get behind with any of these teams, I think you'll see a healthy dose of Pacheco to try to get us back into games with the three ball. We have other shooters that can shoot the three ball, Burks being one of them. Folks has started to come in his own as far as the three ball is concerned. So we have shooters, right?
Riley Kugel can definitely light it up if he gets hot, for sure.
Yeah, but I think Pacheco is going to be that guy that we bring in with situational basketball in mind, and also depending on the opponent that we're playing and what our strategy is against that opponent. The good thing is that I think one of the big differentiators for this team, which can not only help it get to the tournament, but could go a little deeper in the tournament, is that we have enough depth pieces that we can play strategic basketball and not have to rely on one type of offense or one defense. We saw pick and rolls. We have, it's not always dribble, weave, stand around the 3-point line, try to create space, and DJ tries to get into the paint.
Yeah, we've seen like Princeton offense flashes, like backdoor cuts, and it's just been, we've got some versatility on offense. I give a lot of credit to the coaching staff for that.
Yep. All right. Any last thoughts on basketball? I know we're going to have Mike O'Donnell, and you're going to go in depth and get his thoughts on that as well, but later on this week. But is there any other parting thoughts that you have for basketball before we talk a little football?
Yeah, I think the only kind of additional thoughts that I have on that front is just this Saturday, obviously our first conference game, at the Addition Financial Arena, where it's going to be rocking. It's a 2:00 game. It kind of stinks that it's on Peacock for our viewing audience, but we know that the arena is going to be rocking. It's going to be a very important game, but awesome game to watch, hopefully for us. I think our key to that game is simply containing their big man, especially Bedinga, just keeping him off the glass, Stillwell boxing him out, Bull boxing him out, just trying our best to keep him off the boards. I mean, he's averaging over 9 rebounds a game. He's right now their leading scorer with Peterson out. A guy like him is somebody that we really have to make sure that, him and Bryson Tiller and a few other guys that are just really crash the boards hard.
They can cut down on our second chance points, which is something we've lived on all season long. So you're right on, positioning and making sure we're boxing people out and getting the rebounds that we're used to getting, both for them and limiting their second chance points, and us for optimizing our second chance points in the paint after shots.
Yeah, and we gotta get off to a good start. I know that's an obvious statement, but being at home with Kansas coming in here and both teams trying to prove something, trying to set the tone in the conference, I mean, I think it's something that we we got to kind of punch them in the mouth early and just sustain that, which I believe we can sustain it if we can kind of give ourselves a big chance early with kind of jumping out on them.
All right. Let's go ahead and use those immortal words of the Swivet and talk a little bit of UCF football. So, everybody's like, okay, well, what's there to talk about? Well, there's a lot to talk about on UCF football, and really some surprise portal entries for me. So, since the last time we've talked, Stacey Gage has entered the portal. He was really second or third string running back, and it's interesting to me because I would expect him to step up. However, that happened immediately after we were tied to another running back transfer. So I think he saw the writing on the wall because Tavion Swint has is looked at a little bit more favorably by the coaching staff than what Stacey Gage was, bringing in that other transfer. I think he was worried he would sit in the third string position again for the season. So, little concerning because I was really looking forward to seeing him blossom, former 4-star running back, someone that was highly touted and someone who looked like he could move the ball bigger back, which is something that we kind of needed. Horace Lockett, who looked like he was going to be sticking around with UCF. He was a priority for UCF. He had the pec injury in the middle of the season. He had a surgery, then he had another follow-up surgery more recently before this was announced. And supposedly, we heard today that he may have had a third surgery. So this is a guy who played 4 games this past season. He was injured at Georgia Tech as well, which was one of the reasons he left. But he was disruptive and just a menace at the defensive tackle spot for us and for Georgia Tech, which is problematic because John Walker, as we mentioned on the last show, has decided to move on. So that strength that we had at defensive tackle now may be less strong than what we were expecting. And I don't know how much of this is the coaches saying, hey, man, you just had your third surgery. You're going to be here for part of the season. We're not willing to spend as much on the NIL budget on you because of that. And he's just rolling the dice elsewhere. But that's going to be a big loss for UCF because I was expecting a lot of big things out of a very disruptive player who looked amazing. He was one of our top defensive tackles when he was in for us this past season. The next one that went in to mention is Jakari Henderson. So the interesting thing about Jakari Henderson, he didn't get much playing time. The concern with Jakari Henderson is Damari Henderson, who did get a lot of playing time.
Right. Yeah.
And,
are they a package deal, right?
Exactly. So that's really the concern is what is Damari going to do now that Jakari, we've been telling you all along that we thought Jakari would hit the portal, and the question that's still left unanswered is Damari. Now, he has not declared for the portal. Remember, portal season really starts January 2nd unless a coach leaves, right? So you saw with Iowa State, when Matt Campbell left, they lost 42 members of their roster, including their highly touted quarterback, etc. When he left, it just decimated the roster. 42 players went into the portal. So Iowa State's going to be starting from scratch with a new head coach, which they were late in the season in the coaching carousel to get a new head coach because of when Matt Campbell left. And then secondarily, now they're coming up on portal season again on the 2nd, where they're going to have to reload a roster. And Iowa State hasn't had to deal with this in the new era like UCF has. Last year it was even crazier because we had 70, I think it was like 72 new players on our roster, which is absolutely crazy. But it also goes back to the question as well, when you start thinking about this, is the coaching staff themselves, now that the coaches are moving around for money a little more often, now that, a big part of what a coach's negotiation is, even with a new with a new staff or a new position is how much are they willing to put towards NIL? So where does that leave Scott Frost and UCF? And let's say Scott Frost doesn't work out. We're all hoping that's not the case, but are we going to be in this perpetual washing machine, basically, of players and coaches? Because it really highlights the importance of having stability at that coaching position for UCF long term. Otherwise, it's a problem. Our 4 stars that we've gotten recently, Jalen Howard left, Kylan Fox left. Now, Kylan Fox, you have some questions there. We had our other tight end, highly touted tight end, leave the year before. Stacey Gage left. Burdell Richardson, who was highly touted and we were expecting a lot of, left. He didn't really produce the way that we would have expected him to. And remember, it's about 20% of all the high school players will become a contributing member of the team, which this year we're at 13, although we have a highly rated wide receiver, Holmes, that's going to be making his announcement on his birthday in early January, I think on the 2nd or 1st or 2nd, which we're expecting him to come our way. So it should be 14 players and then a 15th one that had an academic issue that hopefully will get cleared up to bring him in. But still, that means only 20% of those players are going to be contributing members, and that's first teamers, second teamers that are going to contribute to a roster. So we're going portal heavy. And right now it's all about the negative, about the guys that are leaving for the portal. But starting January 2nd, we'll start hearing some more commitments, although we did have a slew of commitments that came back out offensively for players that said that they are recommitting to UCF, which is, it's crazy that we're even having that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, another guy you talked about, Lockett, which is a big loss. And then obviously John Walker, is a hometown guy and we had a depth piece in Derek LeBlanc also, which I'm sure you've talked about in previous weeks. Like he was one of the earlier portal, entries. And so where does that leave our defensive line, which was one of our strengths this past season, and it's just difficult as a fan of a UCF, or as a UCF fan, but fan of teams like UCF that, don't have the quite, always seems to be like we're playing catch up. Every time we get to a certain level of revenue generation, the rest of the teams just move up even further. It's the goalposts continue to get moved for us, where we're always trying to do less with more, which is I think some of the encouragement of having a coach like Scott Frost back, because that was our mentality. I think we need to see a little bit better communication out of Frost to give us, that confidence that we can still be that, little engine that could, or those guys with a chip on our shoulder doing less with more and being more explosive, as opposed to, just kind of throwing our hands up and just being frustrated with this era. But we need to figure out a way to compete in this era, and it's not necessarily going to be shelling out the biggest checks to everybody. But that being said, being super strategic about how we dedicate our resources and going after those guys that kind of diamond in the rough guys that, hopefully will understand the vision long enough to, after they have a great year, still stick around. Because that's the route that I'd like to go, and I think a lot of UCF fans would agree, is maybe trying to go that diamond mining route. But once we have success with certain players, really figuring out a way to keep them here, invest.
Well, I think the key to that, going back to the coaching comment, is can we as a fan base, and assuming Frost, would be successful long term, but not as successful as we wanted, initially. Would they have the patience to get to that point? Because that coaching to compete, you're going to have coaching consistency, right? So, like, for example, the recommitments that we were talking about, some key players, Waden Charles, who was a freshman last year, who we were expecting to develop and took a bigger role. We still have Day Farmer, who was injured preseason that didn't come back, or that didn't play, right? And he was a big get, and we were expecting a lot out of him. Dwayne Thomas Jr. This week recommitted to UCF, and then we also had tight end Dylan Wade that are expected to come back. So Dylan Wade was a big part of our offense this past season, so that's good. Waden Charles was developing into a bigger part of our offense, so that's also good. And Dwayne Thomas Jr., although he was injured for parts of the season, I think he's one of those guys that we need to figure out how to use. And it goes back to consistency too in how much of the offense you can install. If your entire team is primarily new players, right, and your starters are new players, it's going to be really hard to get your whole playbook in. And Frost said during the season he only had about 30% of his playbook in offensively. So towards the end of the season, and that makes sense because these players either couldn't pick them up or not. Now you buoy that with the fact that, you know, that sweet spot, if you're talking about, you know, juniors that are coming in, they should be seasoned enough that they can pick up the offense, right, pretty quickly, or the defense pretty quickly, and then stick around for another year so they can really do well, and hopefully you bring the next cycle of juniors in to kind of learn behind them, and that's how you have that consistency. That's what K-State has done for a really long time. Now, their offensive linemen, you know, K-State has always had good offensive linemen, and they used the black shirt or blue shirt program extensively for them. So basically they were walk-ons. But then again, it's, you know, it's just like anything else. These players that are not going to go to the NFL, and only 0.5% of the D1 players will, their job is to maximize the amount of revenue that they can make out of NIL every year, right? So if you make it one year, you get paid whatever you agreed to that year. If you're in the too deep or don't make it, then you've got to go find another contract, because UCF won't pay you the same as what they paid to bring you here, right? So there's so many dynamics, and then you pair this with this, the agents are getting paid so much, and it's a wide variety of what they're getting paid by these players. They're pushing this too. In fact, we lost one of our director of player personnel, Jeff Love, who just became an agent.
Right.
Literally listen. So he's got access to UCF's entire database. He knows these players, etc. Now there's an agreement, a non-compete involved, where he can't represent players personally from UCF. However, that doesn't mean that his agency can't. Do that. So just because he can't do it personally doesn't mean his agency can't represent those players. So, for example, Damari Henderson just signed with Simon something agency, which is one that has been picking up a lot of UCF players lately. And so that, does that bode well? I mean, there's internal negotiations that they have representation for, but there's also external. So the agent's job, they're going to get paid a percentage of whatever they make. So they're going to try to push them as much as possible. Same way with coaching, what you saw the Penn State saga after Franklin was fired, how the most important sports agents in the country basically blocked Penn State from bringing in coaches in, and the top tier coaches. And, you're going to start to see the same thing players are. And there was a report, and I will say, take this with a huge grain of salt, because of the source. They reported it, wrote an article, etc., all about how Texas Tech, part of their strategy has been to offer players or talk to players about offering a higher dollar amount for their NIL versus what they're getting today, so that that schools have to go back to their own departments and pay those players more, so it takes up more of their pool, which means they can be less competitive for higher dollar players. So that's supposedly, based on this article, allegedly part of their strategy and NIL strategy, even within other Big 12 schools. So it's absolutely gone off the rails.
Really has.
Legitimately has gone off the rails. So I'm just waiting for more Ole Miss situations to happen so that the SEC gets pissed off enough so that they will start doing something about it. Because that's really going to be the key to driving change, is when the Big Ten, which the Big Ten has already said stuff about it. Greg Sankey has already said stuff about it. But when you see wholesale change, like you had a team in Ole Miss that should be competing for a championship, lose their head coach, and then most of the coaching staff right before the playoff, and have their players being offered by other people. And Ole Miss spends money. They're not cheap.
Yeah.
So when that starts happening to SEC teams, where they're starting to turn into basically what we predicted for the G6, that's when change is going to be driven. Because yes, some SEC schools have outside influence, but there's enough teams like Florida who can raise noise, or Ole Miss that can start rattling, the chains, or even LSU or some of those teams, that if this starts to happen, or Alabama starts, going by the wayside because Nick Saban is no longer there, they don't have that extra push from Nick Saban. Now they're just competing on money. That will drive change for all of this, but we're still talking 2 or 3 years from now.
Easily. I mean, you've got it on the basketball front. I mean, obviously, like John Calipari has just like gone on like crazy rants. This, not crazy because I agree with everything he's saying. It's kind of tragic because he's just gone on big rants this week about everything that's going on in college basketball right now, which is, it all has the same correlation. I mean, shoot, Baylor just signed a player who 2 years ago was drafted number 32 overall.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And and he's going to be playing game 1 in conference. Like, what are we doing here? Like, back when we were in school,
back in my day,
you had to sit out a full year if you went anywhere, let alone and now we got players coming into college campuses in January and playing immediately on the basketball team. Like, that's insane to me. Like, forget the whole NBA he got drafted thing. Now you've got players that are just coming off the street essentially, and playing immediately, and that's just wild to me. And football and basketball are just, both of those sports. I mean, it goes on in other sports, of course. Transfer portal is huge in other sports. I mean, it's benefited a couple family members of mine, but by the same token, it's
I know he should be going to UCF, but we're not.
Well, no, the transfer portal hasn't benefited.
No,
that family member, but his sister
NIL has.
His sister it has. I mean, my niece Peyton, went from Coastal Carolina to Mercer to play soccer, and she winded up in a better situation. But by the same token, and she didn't have to sit out, and I'm happy for her that she got to do that. But by the same token, as I've talked about so many times before, I mean, especially in football and basketball, there has never been an era of any sports, regardless of college sports or whatever, but there's never been an era where more is asked of the fans from a financial standpoint and from a, hey, stick with us standpoint, and less has been given to the fans than this era. Like, it's the least fan-centric era of any sport in the history of sports.
Wow. That's a big statement.
It is. I mean, nobody like we're big UCF fans because we went to school there. We have a dedication to the university and the programs that are representing that university from a sports perspective. But I mean, but have we ever sat in an era of being what I just described, a UCF fanatic? Have we ever sat in an era where, quite honestly, the product that you're watching on the field or on the court cares less about the fans that are there? Like I can't think of a single era that this is the case. Like, and I'm not talking about any individual players. I'm not even talking about the UCF players. I'm just saying in general, like you got these players that are just straight up mercenaries. I mean, and Calipari said it really well. I don't know if you saw that rant that he went on, but like, I mean, he even talked about it from the life perspective of as you just mentioned, Roger, like how their job is to try to get as much money. They're not going to go to the NFL, so they're trying to get as much money for these 4 or 5 years as they possibly can. And if that means that they have to transfer 3 or 4 or 5 times, they're going to do that because all they want to do is get money. And one of the things that he said is that, like, I know that education doesn't matter anymore. I get that. It's a complete joke to even call it college athletics. But like his point was a good one where he said, if you're transferring for the 4th time and you're coming to a school like Arkansas, his school, and like, are you going to graduate from Arkansas? Like, what's your credits like? Like, what is your college situation like? And if you've been bouncing around for 4 years, and you don't graduate at the end of that, you don't have a college degree, and now all of a sudden you've gotten used to a lifestyle where you're getting paid $200,000-300,000 a year, and you no longer have that because why does John C. Booster care about a kid that is no longer eligible to play college football anymore? Like, you're not going to just give that guy $300,000 because he's there. Like, and so that gravy train stops as soon as they're done playing at the college level and they don't make the NFL. Like, what are these I hate to call them kids, but what are these athletes at that point, former athletes, doing with their life?
Well, I mean, you've got some schools that are combating that, like Tulane. They will only recognize 60 credit hours, transfer credit hours, no matter what.
I did learn that actually from my brother-in-law, that there's many institutions such as Stanford, Duke, Michigan, that they will, you're right about that, Roger. And it is worth acknowledging that they will not accept certain, if you're supposed to be certain along in school for your credit hours, like, they're not going to bring you in. But you could argue that that's a disadvantage for those schools that stick.
It is, and it isn't. It's a disadvantage in bringing other people in, but it is an advantage in keeping those kids, because those once they get past their sophomore season, or or even if they're a redshirt freshman, then they basically throw away all those credit hours.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I mean? So that could help, but it really doesn't matter if they're not getting paid on par with what they got paid before, because those are year-to-year deals. Right?
Why wouldn't you? Right? Like, you're a 19-year-old, 20-year-old young man. Like why wouldn't you try to just maximize the amount you can make?
It's life-changing money for them, and also their families.
Money for me,
and also with their families, right? That's the biggest part of that too. Okay, we are 1:38 in, and I need to get to AJ Blazik and get our listener love section in. So we have a long off season to talk about all the problems and the possibilities as far as NIL and everything else is concerned.
We finally get to talk about incoming transfers after Saturday. Yeah. So I'm excited about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So UCF did welcome AJ Blazik as our new O-line coach. So Blazik, it comes to us from Wisconsin, where they had a little challenging of a season last year because they lost a lot of their offensive line starters, their center, etc., to injury, right? But Blazik is coming in as having done well at the previous year at Wisconsin, and they got better after those guys switched out. The O-line has gotten back out. So kind of going over his career, his alma mater was University of Iowa. So he was there. He coached for 4 seasons there from 2001 to 2004 as a student assistant, then graduate assistant. Then he went to Winona State, wherever that is, in Kansas, as the offensive coordinator and O-line coach at Fort Hays State, which is a JUCO. He coached 5 offensive linemen to all conference honors. Then he left there and went to Western Illinois, where he had a 4-year stint there in Minnesota Winona was in Minnesota. Then he went to Western Illinois, where he worked with the offensive line and tight ends and was the co-offensive coordinator. He was the 2012 Assistant Coach of the Year by the American Football Coaches Association. Then in 2013, the offensive line approved it allowed the offensive line moved up more than 60 spots from 2011. And then while he was at Western Illinois, they got an at-large bid to the FCS playoffs, which is huge for that team. They'd never done that before. And then he went to North Dakota State, which is a big name, is a pretty big name in Division II ball. They were constantly there for championships. So he had a lot of good success there. He went to Rutgers as well as offensive line coach, and then ended up going to Wisconsin. We talked about Wisconsin. So he's got a lot of experience, but he's also got experience not just being an offensive line coach. He also was run game coordinator. He was also a offensive coordinator, so he can put the bigger pieces of it. And he was at successful programs. Wisconsin is known for their offensive lines as well. And he was considered to be a sacrificial lamb for the coach, the head coach at Wisconsin last year, with the injuries that they sustained. But he comes to us and he's been successful and has done better, has improved offensive lines at every single stop that he's been. He also was at Vanderbilt as well and helped them in 2022 and 2023. Their offensive line only allowed 1.25 sacks per game in the season, 4th in the SEC and 26th nationally, which is saying a lot against SEC defenses. So this is a guy who knows what he's doing. I'm actually pretty excited about him. He has a really good reputation for continuously improving those offensive lines, and it was extremely important that we got one in before the portal opened. Yeah. So he's got a good rep. He's been good stops. He's had success that he can sell to these offensive linemen coming into the portal and saying, hey, listen, I can help you get better so that we can have a successful football team. And we obviously, offensive line and quarterback are the 2 biggest pieces that was hindering us, because we had a pretty solid defense last year, and our defensive coordinator, who's coming back this year, I'm really excited about, and I'm confident that he's going to turn in another year of great defense. So having someone like that's that well versed, has been successful at developing folks, has been at a lot of really successful stops, has turned around and coached All-Americans, etc. I'm excited, and is considered a good recruiter as far as offensive line is concerned. I'm excited that AJ Blazik will be coming to UCF as our offensive lineman, offensive line coach. I think it's a better hire than what I was expecting us to be able to get. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, all those things that you mentioned, one of the things that I'll just steal from your notes here as well is like over the last 10 years at Rutgers, NDSU, and Vanderbilt, he has developed 8 active NFL offensive linemen. So, I mean, that's something that he can really use and utilize as part of his pitch to the potential transfer recruits that he's going to be talking to shortly. So yeah, I think it's a big time get. I mean, it's obviously something that it was just such a tough thing what happened to our offensive line, or obviously with the passing of our offensive line coach suddenly in the middle of the season, just like such a unique and horrible thing to happen, and I actually think it affected our football team overall, like, and Scott Frost in general, like a lot more than probably people realized. But that aside, I mean, we had to go into this season prior to January with somebody who we were very confident in that spot, and I'm glad we got AJ Blazik. I mean, he seems to be very qualified and highly thought of, and one that hopefully can bring in some serious offensive linemen to kind of bounce back from a
Well, he's going to have to, because
poor performance last year.
he's going to have to, because most of our, well, pretty much all of our offensive line is gone from this year.
Yeah,
and
they're going to be brand new, and they weren't that great last year either. So,
well, a lot of them were told to leave. They knew it
Yeah.
was going to be a complete rebuild. So we're going to have to be really, really good in the portal. And again, offensive linemen aren't cheap, and there's a reason for that. We're going to have a freshman, more than likely freshman quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see. Well, the two things I'm going to be looking for out of the portal, which starts January 2nd and goes for 2 weeks, is, do we pull in another more experienced quarterback? If so, do we have like the ability to draw someone like, and will we spend on someone like a Rocco Beck that's out there? Or are we going to bring in someone like we had this year who's largely going to compete? And do we ride with our freshmen? I mean, you look at BYU and see what they've done with their freshman quarterbacks and the success that they've had. But a lot of that goes back again to the offensive line. So those are the two biggest pieces that I'm going to be looking for as we start this portal season on the incoming acquisitions, is what I'll call them, in offensive line and quarterback. And I imagine that's going to be where the lion's share of our money is going to go for acquiring new talent.
And maybe you could tell me, Roger, like, and maybe it hasn't been settled, regardless of how you feel about the possibility, but has this Cam Fancher like extra year of eligibility been decided officially yet, as far as you know, or
no?
Yeah, and so I mean that obviously I don't think it would be ideal at all, to say the least. But I mean that could obviously be a strategy potentially of like bringing somebody like that back to be some form of bridge to these younger guys. Not that he would want that to necessarily be the case, because obviously he wants to be able to maximize his last year of college. But I mean, it could be a bridge there.
I think Cam Fancher wants his last year of college. They're still, supporting him in his bid to get that year back. But I think he's also said that he's completely comfortable playing that backup role. Mm-hmm. So I think if you get guys like, we've got Kane Archer that we're bringing in, and you've got some of the other folks that we're bringing in. Rocco coming in as well, another Rocco. Yeah.
Well, we didn't get Kane Archer, right? We got Rocco Marriott and Dante Carr.
Dante Carr, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry. So Dante, he's comfortable going to tight end. So really, we have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, right? If Cam Fancher gets that back, I still think that we try to pull, if you get someone like a Rocco Becht or someone that you can pull in, you still try to pull someone like that in.
I would fully agree with you there. Whether or not we could get him is a question, but yeah, I would agree with you. If you have an opportunity to get a guy like that, you get him.
All right, so let's go ahead and swiv it one last time and Get back and give back to our listeners who we love you when you comment, when you like, subscribe, etc., and just watch and interact with us during the show. So we like to take some of the comments that you provide us and then kind of talk back. So the first one is from Econ Advisor, frequent contributor. For 30 years, UCF took bribes to play power schools in their deafening stadiums, so we were sure to lose. This wasn't about may the best team win, nor were the G5 playoffs at the power team home stadiums. Fortunately, sports outcomes can't matter at all to humanity or to a university, which get none of the revenue or even enrollment funding or donations from their legally separate athletic donations. So our response is, it's all an attempt to monetize more out of college football. And here's the reality of it is the reason you're seeing the TV revenue go up is because college football should be paid more for the content that they're putting out relative to the results that they're getting. So that's why you're seeing this push for the Big Ten and the SEC. What they're doing is they're just they know it's going to be more. They're just trying to get more of that pie as that grows, right? So that they consolidate that revenue. Our fight for the playoff was different, and this was in response to JMU and all those folks in the playoff. Our fight for the playoff was different, as that at the time we could build teams that could compete overtime, unlike today's G6. So, there was a post out there from someone, I can't remember which media personality it was, but a major media personality that basically said JMU, after JMU's loss, this is the reason why the playoff, we love the playoff and having the G6s included, but then they started using UCF, Boise, et cetera, as examples. And I clap back at that media personality because the 2017, 2018 teams are different than what today's teams are because of the environment that they're in. The 2017, 2018 teams, we could keep our talent. They didn't, they got to season for a few years. You had guys that was a mix of George O'Leary players and a mix of Scott Frost players, especially on the offense, right? So when we caught lightning in a bottle with Mackenzie Milton and AK and some of those guys.
Team Griffin, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't leave, right? So the team, the big thing between 4 and 5 stars and 3 stars, 2 stars, a lot of the times there's more 2 and 3 stars in the NFL than there are 4 and 5 stars. The difference is 4 and 5 stars have the athletic ability because in high school, the mental game isn't there yet. They're playing simple concepts, but they have the athletic attributes that allow them to dominate their offensive their high school teams, right? And so whether they pan out and have the mental part of it is what you learn as they play in Division I teams, and that's where you see these guys cycle out of Alabama's and everywhere else, right? So that's the difference, though, because a team like JMU, their coach was gone again. They lost their Signetti, who's the coach at Indiana now. That was their head coach.
He was their former coach.
He was at JMU, and then their coach from this year has already been poached, and all of their players have been poached. So I would argue that UCF's teams would have done better in the playoff, and then they used LSU as a reference. And another thing,
Mackenzie Milton.
Well, exactly, and that's where I clap back on that too. We almost won that game with a backup quarterback because we lost our starting quarterback the game before against the Cows. Yeah. So it's ignorance like this, and I'll clap back and I'll put up for those 2017, 2018 teams because those teams were different and in a different era than what the current G6 is, and it's actually harder for the current G6. All right, let me go ahead and shout out Madame Boutique. She's back, frequent contributor. She went on a hiatus for a bit, but it was so good to see her back. She says and I love how she puts timestamps in there. She says 15406 regarding recruiting outside of Florida. Many of these recruits in areas being recruited were also due to relationships assistant coaches had with those players areas prior to coming to Florida. Frost mentioned that in the signing day presser. I'd imagine that ratio moves back in favor of Florida for each season that passes. And I agree with Madame Boutique because the coaches that we did bring in, none of them had a lot of Florida ties. They were Midwest guys, they were West Coast guys, etc. I'll also say that one of my points on that was that Frost was out of football for a long time. So, continuing those relationships that he had at the high school level, he was gone for, 5-6 years, something like that. There's a lot of head coaching change. A lot of guys have gone to Georgia because they pay better. So, you have to rebuild those relationships with those high school head coaches again. And we lost some of our guys that were holdovers now this past year to FSU and et cetera, that were, part of our recruiting staff that those high school coaches knew. So it's going to be tough sledding. We just lost a Love as well. So it'll be tough sledding, but that should improve. Greg Woody 1001 says the season should have ended last week when we were left with only one undefeated team. And I said, if they go to a 16 team playoff, which seems maybe accelerated, I think you might get your wish with the elimination of championship games. Do you think this should happen? Thanks for checking in. So, if we go to a 16-team playoff, what's the point of championship games is basically the point there. And we'll talk about that as that gains momentum, because that is gaining steam again after this most recent playoff performance. AG Galaxy 7 says they should take the BCS Bowls out of the playoffs, have the playoffs for sure, but have the BCS Bowls outside of it so that teams don't just go to the playoffs, still have something to aim for. Bowls are great and people will watch. Just adjust to the system for all the thousands of people who still put in the work all season. Response was, I agree. I don't think it should make a difference right now, given the timing of the portal. Similar situations to teams resting for the playoffs in the NFL. The incentive is too great, and the cons, if injured, aren't worth it given what they earn and what they could earn. Thank you for watching and commenting. And the point being there is, hey, these players aren't going to play in these bowl games. They're going to sit them out because they're already got their next gig lined up and they're not going to want them to play in them. And then if they do get hurt, they lose that contract. And especially those teams that are playing in the lower bowls, they're probably going to get picked off to higher level teams. So their contracts are going to go down significantly.
Basically fix the timeline.
Yeah. And then Doug Whalen 3189 just says John Walker crying emoji. We all agree it's sad. All right, that takes us to 156.45. We would have talked about those comments a little bit more, but we got our fill of basketball. Remember, this week we'll have Mike O'Donnell with Ben previewing the conference season as well. So more basketball coming your way. If you guys if you came in late, make sure that you're checking out the other stuff. We'll get the timestamps. Thank you for everyone who commented, liked, subscribed, and shared. Please make sure you continue to do that. That helps us reach more people. We're reaching about 20,000 or so people a month now. We'd like to up that even more. We don't make any money off of this, so this is just having more people involved in our content and being part of the conversation. So thank you so much, everyone, for viewing, watching, sharing, subscribing, and liking. And 2017 national champs, good show. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you. If there's anything that we can do or anything you guys want to hear about, talk about, obviously drop it in the comments in the show. Also, the comments after the show, we do help shape the show as well. So thank you guys. Thank you, Ben, for doing that exhaustive review of our hoops team. We're excited for Kansas this weekend, excited for what's coming up for the portal. Go Knights and
Charge on.
Charge on, baby. Okay, so this is the part of the show where we talk about random stuff. And since Josh is not here, Josh needs to be here. He needs to stop eating ice cream in New York. Who does that? I mean, it's too cold up there. Why